This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
I'm hoping that last night's game was a precursor of what to expect across the remainder of Week 14, because that game fully lived up to expectations between the Lions and the Packers. We're going to break down the rest of the Week 14 slate from a player prop perspective and try to identify where else we can have some fun across this Sunday and Monday slate. We're going to talk to Austin Swaim, a writer for us at FanDuel Research, picking his brand on his top player props, how to handle some defenses that have been surging recently, whether we want to buy, believe in that stuff or potentially buy into props against them and bet on regression. Talk about how much playoff contention matters for him, then dig into his top yardage and touchdown picks this week and a SGP he likes at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Austin Swaim. You can find him on both Twitter and Blue Sky at ASwaim3. You can find him over at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor for us. Austin, thriller of a way to begin Week 14 last night. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I bet Josh Jacobs' yardage prop, or at least I tracked it here in Texas based on what I was looking at the market. So I somehow found an offensive prop that didn't hit last night, even though it scored 3 times. But it was a heck of a game, came right down to the end. And Dan Campbell, I gave him grief even on X about going for it in his own territory, but he went for it at the right time and delivered there late in that game.
I have not run these numbers myself, so I'm not sure if NumberFire's analytics agree with this, but apparently he gained about 7 expected points on fourth down decisions last night, including the bad ones. So the ones that did not work for them, if you look at all of them, he added about 7 expected points. Part of that's because a lot of them worked, and that's going to definitely help things out, but it was great. It was a lot of fun to watch. I know that the last one may not have been what the numbers would have recommended, but from a football watching perspective, it's kind of fun to watch a team just commit to bully ball. So yeah. I thought from that perspective, it was pretty cool.
And I'm just here for committing to how I play college football 25, which is always going for it. So
always on tilt, because if you got to fourth down, that means you're probably tilted. That means you got to go for it. Your punter probably sucks anyway. Just go for it, baby. I agree. Dan Campbell is us, one of us. And I fully respect the commitment to being on tilt at all times. We're going to break down Austin's thoughts on Week 14 again, talking about some of those defenses. Should we avoid the Eagles with all player props? Should we take some unders against them? Talk about the Seahawks too, because they've been playing pretty good football recently. We'll talk about how much contention matters, because I like Isaac Orendo in DFS and stuff like that this week, but his team still in the hunt technically, but if they've kind of quiet quit, it seems like, as well. Then we'll dig into Austin's top player props across Week 14. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our breakdown of the College Football Conference Championship games is up. Riley Thomas joined me on Wednesday, breaking down his thoughts on that, his favorite bets across this weekend. We also have our NFL Week 14 Best Bets show with Dubs Anderson of FanDuel TV up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Just search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe. And if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and review as well. Of course, these shows now streamed live on our brand new YouTube page. Go to this YouTube page, leave us a thumbs up if you like what you hear. Subscribe and enable notifications to get notified as we go live Monday through Friday. Our DFS show for Week 14 also up on the YouTube page right now. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Jack, Connecticut. Visit MDGamblingHelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or Call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Austin, let's begin things with the motivation side of things, because we're getting into the stretch run here, and a lot of teams are no longer in contention. And I want to ask you, how much does that matter for betting player props? How much do you care when a team is no longer pushing for the playoffs?
Yeah, it is a interesting question, because different bettors have different strategies. Some cross off games that don't have any motivation at all. I think I have certain rules that are my baseline expectation when I go to bet a player prop, if you will, anyway, in that when I go into a game to bet player props, I'm assuming it'll be competitive. I'm assuming that the player I'm betting on, their offense, is probably undervalued in some way, maybe as a running offense or a passing offense. And I believe that there's a reason that the player has a role that is equal to or better than what the market is expecting, right? Those are all the things I need to bet a player props no matter what. So how does motivation impact those things? I think it's really just the intent of the coaching staff. It feels like the gap between the elite teams and the very bottom, the teams like my Raiders at the bottom that are kind of, they're looking for a quarterback and their motivation is very different. But the Raiders, you look at their usage, they're still feeding Brock Bowers. They're still feeding Jacoby Myers. They seem intent to compete now. Whereas a team like the Giants, they're doing weird stuff. They're missing Andrew Thomas. They went to Tommy DeVito right past Drew Lock initially. Weird early game usage for Devin Singletary last week on Thanksgiving. So the Giants are a team that I'm a little iffy on. The Jaguars, I think, without Trevor Lawrence now, could be a team that shells up. But you mentioned the 49ers, and specifically to Isaac Guerendo. He's a rookie, so that's motivation to play a young guy and kind of check him out. And at the same time, the 49ers are the type of team that I feel like they have so much talent that they're not going to give up until it's completely over. The NFC West is kind of open. And I don't know if there's that much available usage for other backs not named Isaac Guerendo this week. So I wouldn't be scared off Guerendo. I think I'm a little aggressive compared to some bettors in those situations. But if I have reason to believe a game's going to be competitive and the offense can move the ball, I'm still open to it while knowing the risks.
Yeah, with Guerendo, I think we've seen it before, which is helpful. He was getting work when Jordan Mason was up there. I think that's an impactful sign for us. He does carry some draft capital with him. Mm-hmm. Patrick Taylor started from the practice squad, but he was on the practice squad for a reason. And then Izzy Abanikanda is now at the team as well. So it's a pretty thin depth chart behind him. So I agree that buying into Guerendo is okay, but it is a case-by-case basis, as you alluded to, kind of making sure this team is still committed to giving the players the usage we're expecting down the stretch. Mm-hmm. Also wanted to pick your brain about the defenses, because I think I tend to maybe undervalue defense a bit. I do it intentionally because I think that offense is stickier and easier to predict, but that can burn me at times. We got some defenses like the Eagles and the Seahawks playing really well recently. Do you tend to buy into shifts like that where these defenses improve, or do you look to bet on regression to the larger sample in spots like this?
So this is a spot where I'm much more inclined to buy this small sample, because I have a hypothesis. NFL teams, they hit less than ever in August. There's less physical contact in practice. Quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends, they can establish rhythm and timing without contact. They can just throw against air, 7-on-7, whatever you want to do. Defenses really need live reps to work on certain assignments, coverage assignments in zone. It's a much more fluid situation that over the course of the year, especially with great coaching, can improve. And when we talk about the Eagles and the Seahawks, in the
pretty good coaches,
great coaching, right? The Eagles have Vic Fangio. Before their bye in week 5, they allowed 0.14 offensive net expected points per play, which is number fire's EPA metric. Then after the bye, league best negative 0.09 cents. Exact demarcation point for the Seahawks before their bye in week 10, 0.07 NEP per play. Now league best negative 0.13. So in this smaller sample, they're even above Philly. So it kind of matches my theories that great coaches, they need time. They get it, especially during an in-season bye week, and the results have been substantially better. By the way, Houston and Dallas are a couple other defenses that have performed better after their bye week than before. So significant improvements, elite defensive coaches, and as a result, I am kind of leaning away from the Eagles and Seahawks. I know the Panthers have been America's team surging here these last few weeks with Bryce Young absolutely balling out, but I am a little worried for the Panthers this week. They're 13.5-point underdogs, I think, for a reason. And then the Seahawks, strange 2.5-point underdogs against the Cardinals. that could be another defensive sort of battle with how well we saw the Cardinals defense play last week. So I'm tend to buy into these small samples. I think I'm almost on the other side of the coin with you, where maybe I value defensive matchup too much. And really, you've kind of changed my lens on this when you talk about the new kickoff coming out to the 30-yard line. There's only 100 yards on a football field. We took away 10 of them that the defense has to cover in situations. It's kind of a big deal. And so I've been betting more overs and overs on props this season as a result.
Yeah, I've had a lot more overs on totals as a result of that. I think that just kind of I've baked up an upward movement that hasn't been in the market, and totals have been very good for me this year. So that's definitely been a positive for sure. And I think that going back to the defenses, it's not just the coaching, but also like those teams have actually had changes in personnel. And like Cooper DeJean playing really well, Quinyon Mitchell playing really well, Ernest Jones with the Seahawks, they traded for him. He's been playing really well, and they had a lot of injuries. So it's a convergence of personnel improving, but also good coaches. And I think that's why I also agree. I want to be skeptical of teams facing them because I think that those defensive surges are probably more legit than they are not. Let's talk about some actual props now, Austin. Opening the board to you across week 14. Let's talk about player props from a yardage perspective first. We're seeing value there across week 14 at FanDuel Sportsbook.
Yeah, so I'm looking first at, of course, the place you'd look for player props, Giants and Saints here. I'm looking at, you probably already know who I'm looking at because there's one guy, well, maybe a couple, but Alvin Kamara, I'm looking at his scrimmage yardage. It's sit at 121.5 this week for over rushing and receiving. It's a huge number, but I think it's worth it because he got a little bit of a hit and roll bump in wake of Taysom Hill's injury. They were giving some carries to Taysom out of the backfield. Last week, he had 23 carries. The previous 3 games before that, it was just 20.7. So a little bit more work on the ground. Of course, he's going to get his targets. He got 6 of them last week. That was 29 total touches, and this matchup really can't get much better for him. The Giants are the 4th worst schedule-adjusted rush defense per Number Fire's metrics, and they also allow the 6th most receiving yards to running backs. So Kamara is a guy, I feel like he's got the total timeshare, if you will, in this backfield. But he's one guy I don't feel comfortable taking rushing or receiving because if I bet rushing, he's popping a long pass for 50 yards. If I bet receiving, he's just going to chew the Giants up on the ground, as has happened. Even Rico Dowdle got him on Thanksgiving. So I definitely feel comfortable taking this large number. I've got him projected over 125 in this spot. So I think Alvin can run wild on this Giants team.
Well, you mentioned how bad the Giants have been, but now they have no Dexter Lawrence, and that's going to make it worse. He is the best player on their team, not their defense, on their team, and now he's out. That's going to open up a lot more for Kamara. And I do worry a bit about Kendre Miller being back in this game, but the Saints technically are still alive to win the NFC South. I know that's like bizarre, but like they could still win the NFC South. So until the time that is no longer in play, I think we'll still see a pretty full complement of Kamara. So Kamara over 121.5 minus 114, Austin's first prop of the day. Which other yardage props are you targeting this week?
So I'm looking to the Vikings-Falcons game, which I think is a fun one for offense, certainly of the ones we have available with props and not much injury news. It is a very normal thing for wide receivers to go several games, even 5 of them, without 100-plus receiving yards, unless you are Justin Jefferson. He is currently tied for the longest streak of his career under 100 yards. It's 4 games dating back to even his rookie season, really, before the breakout. Realistically, there are more options in this Vikings pass attack after TJ Hawkinson returned 4 weeks ago. Coincides exactly when this started, right? I'm still optimistic for Jefferson. 24.8% target share is the best on the team, 7.8 looks per game, and some of the looks have just not been catchable or efficient. You think back, the first game in this stretch was the 3-interception game in Jacksonville for Sam Darnold, where offensive fun went to die. So I love this matchup for Jettis. Number Fire's 9th worst schedule-adjusted pass defense are the Atlanta Falcons. They've given up at least 7 catches or 100 receiving yards to the opposing team's fantasy wide receiver 1 in 5 straight games. I feel confident Jettis, if he can get 7 catches, is going to get to that century mark. Spread here's fine, 5.5 points. Maybe a little bit of a revenge narrative for all these guys against Kirk Cousins, right? You kind of want to win the divorce too, so that doesn't hurt either. So I like Jettis over 86.5 receiving yards. If you told me before the season I'd be able to get this at any point in any matchup, I would have taken it handily.
It's down to 83.5, actually. So even a bit better value there for you. Over is minus 114. Any consideration for you for the alt market for Jefferson? Given you mentioned, he hasn't gone over 100 in a while. It's plus 162 for Jefferson to get 100 plus yards. Is that long enough for you to consider it? Or do you want the outs there, given that the efficiency is not great, and it's probably good not to expect that efficiency to suddenly turn around, given the quarterback hasn't changed?
Well, I wish you had asked me that before the market moved massively against me in the minutes that we've been on here. But I think that Jettis can get back over 100 yards when the reality of the situation is I mentioned his target share is just under 25%. It's not going to be a volume thing as much as we know Jettis can make explosive plays down the field. We talked last time I was on the show talking props. We talked about how Tyreek Hill can do that. Jefferson's the same way where you could get ostensibly 80 plus receiving yards on a couple of different catches. So I like that for Jefferson as far as an alt market as well. A good rule of thumb is if you like betting a specific market, you're probably finding their alt markets undervalued, and Jefferson's a high variance guy that I think fits that mold for sure.
Unless the player is Wan'Dale Robinson, in which case you never touch an alt market. Why would you possibly do that? But Jefferson over 83.5 minus 114 right now. FanDuel Sportsbook in addition to the Kamara prop as well. Let's talk some touchdown bets, Austin. What are you seeing there as far as value across week 14?
Yeah, so I'm looking at another fantasy hotspot, right? Jaguars Titans here. The Titans, you think they're maybe potentially tanking for a quarterback? Not sure. They're down 21-0 in the blink of an eye last week. They would have had every reason to give Tyjae Spears more snaps last week and work him back in after he returned from a concussion. But Tony Pollard still had the featured role here. He played 72% of the snaps. It earned 8 carries and 6 targets for him. I would expect that his snap share actually might decrease this week because they seem to perceive him as the better receiving back. So if the spread holds true, Titans are minus 172 on the money line. We could see more rushing work in general, but I love this matchup for Pollard in this spot where he still should get a lion's share of the work. Jacksonville is number 5, 7th worst schedule adjusted rush defense. They've allowed the most scrimmage touchdowns to running backs this year with 16 of them. It works well with, I can see the Titans really trying to evaluate Levis because I'm not sure what they're trying to do. Maybe they're not sure what they're trying to do because Levis has just been this up and down roller coaster that's actually shown some promise in recent weeks. I think you play your best players and give him a chance to evaluate him. Quarterback class is a little bit weak this year, so I think they're going to try to win, and that might be Pollard. We've got him projected at FanDuel Research for 0.64 total touchdowns, despite a really low total here. It's only 39.5, but Pollard still, I think, favored for a touchdown for good reason.
Right now, he is minus 105 at FanDuel Sportsbook to score a touchdown.
These markets moving against me every day.
Hey, I mean, it'll work. It'll work. Minus 105 right now for Pollard. To your point about them preferring him over Spears, even the games Spears has played, still a 40% red zone share for Pollard in that time. So he's been the lead guy. It's a good number for a running back. So minus 105 for him here. Their implied total is not bad, definitely, and it's a good matchup for them here. The Jags defense still struggling for sure. So Pollard minus 105 to score at FanDuel Sportsbook. First place Austin is turning to there. Any other touchdown props catching your attention across this week?
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more fun. I'm going to 49ers Bears in this one. I think one of the most notable changes for this Chicago outlook is how much better Caleb Williams has played in recent weeks. And it's kind of turned it from a bust. We weren't sure about how he was looking early on in the season, especially some really low stat lines, to a really attractive job for a quarterback because they've kind of let Caleb go as far as running. And before Shane Waldron was let go, just 25.6 rush yards per game, up to 6.3 attempts and 47.3 rush yards since. And I think could be a game where Chicago ends up incredibly pass heavy, not by choice. DeAndre Swift has missed a ton of practice this week. Roshan Johnson in that realm as well. That would leave just Travis Homer in the backfield. And usually when Travis Homer's in the mix, you're probably going to end up throwing the ball a lot. 49ers are number 5's 5th worst schedule adjusted rush defense. So I would love a running back prop here if I could get it. But they weirdly allowed the 5th most touchdowns to quarterbacks as far as running. So I think rushing yards is probably the smarter bet. Obviously, we'll see what it comes in at when rushing props come out. But I kind of wanted to have fun with Williams. He's plus 310 for a touchdown. At least he was when I looked. And he's had 0.72 expected rushing touchdowns this year, according to Pro Football Focus. Still hasn't scored. So maybe he can get on the board and get number 1 in this matchup.
Yeah, only a slight movement here now, plus 320 for Williams to score. So, and like you said, he's been running a lot more. It's been a lot of design rushes, but also scrambles. They've kind of said that too. Like they've said publicly, like they want him to do that more so he can think a bit less. If the first couple reads aren't there, take off. And he's been willing to do that. He's been effective in doing so too, back out in California. So a little, I guess not homecoming for Caleb Williams, given that he was only there for 2 years, but still think that it's kind of interesting with Williams here. Plus 320, the odds for Williams to score in that game. All right, Austin, I'm going to give you a single same game parlay to place across the entirety week 14. Which game you turn into and what legs do you want included in that SGP?
Let's what do you say we dial up your hometown Vikings in the Kirk Cousins Bowl here for Falcons Vikings? This one has 12 o'clock red zone madness written all over it between these two teams. But I'm going to look toward first I'm going to start with the over, but I'm going to take an alternate over against a key number of 43. I'm going to go over 42.5 points. Our buddy Brandon Gadulo, he puts out so many awesome tools at FanDuel Research. One of them, his adjusted pace and pass report. Both of these teams played a top 13 adjusted pace. So you think maybe the Vikings defense pretty good, right? But there should be play volume in this one. So I kind of like scoring here. We talked about maybe overs have been doing very well because of the kickoff changes. I do like scoring here. Over 42.5 points gets over a key scoring outcome of 43. So that's where I'm starting the same game parlay. Then we kind of dig into the player side. Bijan Robinson, anytime touchdown, it's only minus 105. I think the Tyler Algier concerns are slowly lifting here. Robinson's had 60% of the red zone carries in the last 4 weeks, and he's been on a tear between the 20s, 117.4 scrimmage yards per game, just one touchdown, which always feels like the problem with Bijan, right? But we've got him projected for 0.66 touchdowns, comes in right on this one minus 105 mark for value if you look at it through normal distribution. So I think it's a good number for Robinson in a game where I'm expecting scoring. I am obviously going to look at Justin Jefferson, given we talked about him earlier. The key number that I wanted to get to was 70 because the opposing top option has been over 70 receiving yards in 6 straight games against the Falcons. So over 70 yards, minus 230. But like I said, I think he's got a good shot to get back to the century mark in a good matchup. And then the last leg I'm going to look at to bring this home is going to produce some groans out there. I'm looking at Kyle Pitts, over 25 receiving yards. I know this could all come on one catch, and it might be his only target of the entire game, but I think quietly this Minnesota defense is most gettable to tight ends. They've allowed the 10th most targets in receptions allowed to tight ends. Pitts has been over this 25-yard mark in 6 of his last 8, despite disappointing several fantasy managers along the way, I among them, but 25 yards is 25 yards. I think it's a decent matchup for Pitts in sort of a revenge narrative here for Cousins, and maybe he'll look to the middle of the field with his big guy.
All right, so that 4-leg same game parlay is the Vikings and Falcons over 42.5. Got Bijan Robinson to score, Justin Jefferson 70 plus receiving yards, and Kyle Pitts 25 plus yards. That is plus 391 at FanDuel Sportsbook for that SGP. Hoping for some points as the Falcons take on the Vikings in the Kirk Cousins Bowl. That is all that we have here for today and this week on Covering the Spread. Big thank you once again to you, Austin, for joining us. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy both the college football and the NFL action. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Sounds good, Jim. See you soon, bud.
You can find Austin on both X and Blue Sky at Swaim3. I'm on both X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you all across Week 14. Enjoy the football. We'll talk to you once again Monday to break down the Cowboys against the Bengals. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.